in 2019, I was really fortunate to be asked to help chaperone a trip to India. And I was chaperoning a group of, I think, like 5 or 6 really well-behaved, really respectful high school students. So I was very excited because I knew that part of the trip was going to be easy and I'd really be able to enjoy the rest of this experience of India. And I had lived in Asia for a long time. So I was super excited to get back to Asia and like this kind of frenetic, exciting energy that is there, that I find that really appealing. All these students were coming from all over the world to this conference. They were coming and they were all coming to different parts of India and then journeying over like 2 weeks to come together for a conference. So it felt like this kind of magnetism pulling kids from around the world to this one central point. Already I feel like India is kind of a magical, mystical place. So all of these elements were coming together and I somehow got drawn into this magnetic pull. I didn't even work with high school students at the time. So I felt it felt like serendipity to me. When we arrive at the conference, these Australians had come from Nepal. A bunch of Australian students and teachers had come from Nepal, and they had brought with them, they'd happened to pick up along the way, a yogi, a man who had, he owned everything he owned, he carried in a small bag, like smaller than my purse. He didn't have a phone. He didn't have an address. Like everything he owned, he carried with him. And so the magic of him being swept up in this magnetic draw was like, that was a lot for me. I'm like, there's something really magical happening here. There's something very serendipitous happening. I need to find out what's going on. How did this guy get pulled into this thousands of students coming around the world conference? And then when I saw him, he was dressed in all white. He had a white beard and he was very casual and confident in himself and really like emanated this kind of joyful relaxation. I was like, I want to get some of that. But I was also kind of scared because I also studied yoga and was like a yoga teacher. And I was like, what if this guy meets me? And he can see right through me. And he's like, oh, Western yoga, nothing, that's not right. So I was kind of scared. And when you're scared of the thing and so it's attracted to you and you're like, oh, I want to avoid it, and then you turn around and it's in your face. That's what happened to me. So on the last day of the conference, I'd successfully just admired this really interesting character from afar, but the last day of the conference there was an awards ceremony, and I just happened to be seated next to this group of Australians and next to this yogi, and his name, surprisingly, was Joseph, which is not the most predictable Indian name that you would think of. But I was seated next to him and we had just a few minutes to talk before the awards ceremony started. And I shared like a little bit of my own journey in yoga and my own like seeking of truth and what is the meaning of life, just the basics. And then he shared, part of his life and his journey. And it felt so good to me to be like coming together, finally meeting this person and having my fears alleviated. And so this program begins and kids are coming up to receive awards. And I lean over to him and I say, hey, Joseph, do you think you're going to receive an award today? Like I'm being kind of a smart aleck. And without missing a beat, he says, I am constantly winning prizes. And I laughed and I felt just this kind of delight and this absorbing of his joyful relaxation. Like, wow, everything is a prize. If that's your mindset, I'm constantly winning prizes. Like being drawn to this conference, being drawn at the last meeting to get to sit next to this cool dude that I've been wanting to meet. And like every breath is a prize. Being with your children is a prize. Even the challenging feelings can be a prize if we can feel them and feel our humanity there, And it was like one of the most magical and interesting experiences that I've had and been able to like relay in a way that I think other people can feel it too. So that's my story. I'm constantly winning prizes.
Hello, everyone. This is Gina and Don with Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 19. Today, we are talking with Adrienne Johnson about conscious parenting. But before we get into it, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. Or you can find a link on the front page of the focusedhealthyfamily.com website.
and stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences. And we're back. Adrienne, I love your story, and everything is constantly receiving gifts. What a powerful message that is. Adrienne is the founder of the Kindness Machine, and she also calls herself the Confetti Cannon. That's a wonderful
Cannon.
Cannon. Oh. Cannon.
It's a deep subject, but we won't go into that one.
Hidden depths in the confetti world.
My handwriting, I think, does a bit. Well, you have a lot of things. So much background and so much things you're doing in conscious parenting, and so where do we even start?
I'm curious about the Confetti Cannon and how you came to call yourself that.
I'm so glad you asked, Gina. When you have a group of friends who recognize talents in yourself that you don't recognize. I have a friend that is part of a meditation circle that I'm a part of. And whenever I would join the circle, she'd say, here's the confetti cannon, because I think I have a natural propensity to delight and excitement. Mm-hmm. And also not only is the glass half full, the glass is overflowing, so I have this positivity that I can't help but radiate.
That's wonderful.
Well, it makes me think of the what was the singer that used to do the kids?
Oh, Billy Jonas.
Yeah, he used to do something with that, like the firework sound.
Yes, he had a lot of sound effects, and
Sorry, with a little distraction there.
So she also called me a kid whisperer. Oh. She's like, you're a confetti cannon and a kid whisperer. And I couldn't really, I didn't recognize, I recognized the confetti cannon at the time, but the kid whisperer, I was like, I don't really see that. And then as I continued to do my work or with children, I was like, oh, I am one. Kids really like me. I really connect with them. They're my people. And so she was just someone who really saw these traits in me that I didn't really see in myself. So she's a helpful friend.
So I would say, in thinking about all the stuff that I looked over and what you do, I think the kid whisperer, kid connections is kind of your thing, is what it seems like. Is that would you say that's true?
Yeah. The Kindness Machine started from an idea that my sister and I had. We were writing an article for journal here in the Southeast. And it was about kids dealing with toxic stress during COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And I had this idea. I was like, what if we created a kindness machine? And then the kids, when they're feeling stressed, they play with this machine, and it gives them an idea for an act of service, because we all know service changes our focus and helps us to regulate. And so the idea of the kindness machine is helping kids, connecting with kids to help them be regulated, deal with their big feelings. And I think that's just one of my, I'm really positive, but I can also see children for where they are and who they are in the moment. And so like my big drive is to help make the world a better place for children. And I know that grown-ups are responsible for that. So they working with parents as well to help to create a more nurturing environment in the home and in the schools and in life in general. So that's where I feel like my calling is around.
So tell us more about the kindness machine.
Oh, the kindness machine. So, you know, it's not a physical machine. It is. I mean, I have a prototype of it. And when I create videos for kids about dealing with emotions, then we use the kindness machine and we play with different parts on it. And it gives suggestions for things like breathing exercises or like gratitude practices or those kinds of things that help kids to regulate. Mm-hmm. So that I make videos for kids that are just on my YouTube channel, on my website. And that's just like for free to help kids to learn how to be in the world, because this is a tricky place. And then that's just my umbrella for my conscious parenting business as well.
Okay.
I imagined it as they step into this kindness machine, like almost like a time machine in a way, and they come back out smiling, and their whole thing has changed for them, you know. But I was kind of curious, you know, being that your past was librarian. With what's going on right now with the books, you know, all this stuff about the books being restricted, yeah. You know, how libraries and librarians kind of fit into this age that we have right now. I don't know if you want to, that was your past. I don't know if that's something you do now, but just some thoughts on that. I don't know.
I don't know if you noticed, I'm drinking out of my banned books mug.
Ah.
Oh, cool.
How fitting.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
Well, you know, all through history, people have wanted to control information. So, and they wanted to tell people, oh, don't look at this information. This is dangerous. Don't look at this. This won't bring you happiness and joy, you know? And so I think of librarians as the protectors or stewards of the information. Like we are the holders of it. We direct people to it. And also it's really important for us to be able to help people to look critically at that information, not just take everything in, you know, like we used to say, like, you can't trust everything in a newspaper or something, you know, but just because it's printed doesn't mean you have to trust it. So part of my role, I felt as a librarian working with children, was to teach critical thinking skills, mm-hmm. so that they could see, oh, does this information match what I already think and believe? And if not, do I need to change my belief, or do I need to look for more information to figure out what is my truth and who can I trust? You know, it's really about learning to trust your own self and your thinking. So that's really what I would focus on, is a lot of critical thinking skills and research skills that would help kids to learn to deal with misinformation and information in conflict, and learn to read and trust what they are reading.
That's powerful, because that's a skill that kids need in so many areas of their life as they grow up, critically thinking, being able to analyze any information that's coming at them, things they're being told at school, at work, you know, all kinds of encounters, and to make their own decisions on things.
So you tie that into your practice, I would imagine, you know, help it. I guess tell us a little bit about like what you do because you do coaching, family coaching, parent coaching, I think is what your kindness machine is about. So tell us a little bit more about what you do when you're working with families.
Yeah. Well, a lot of folks come to me because they, you know, recognize that the practices that they have with their kids, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm doing the same thing that my parent did to me. You know, they're like, I want to do it differently. I want to do it better. Or people come to me because they're like, I don't know what to do with my child. My child is having dysregulated periods, and throwing rocks instead of following directions, and you know, doing things that they don't personally know how to deal with, because, you know, we're just grown-ups and we become parents, and there's very little training other than what our parents did for us. So what I do parents in coaching is I actually have a 12-week training program that we talk about neuroscience, and we talk about emotional intelligence, and we learn and practice nonviolent communication. And we really look a lot at generational patterns so that the grownups can get to the root of their own feelings in reaction to what the children are doing, so that they can let go of the stories that have kind of held them captive in the past, and they can allow for their children to experience their own lives without their parents putting on their own generational cycles. So that's just, that's just it. That's all.
Pretty simple. No, not a big deal.
Yeah, it's a common theme I've heard in some other podcasts lately, this whole idea of changing, generational parenting, and that we don't often realize. We may say, I'm going to do it different than my parents, but we really don't know what that looks like. And in moments of stress and crises and just everyday life, you kind of snap to the automatic responses.
Well, I hear, what gets me is that I'll hear my mom's voice come out of me. I was like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? The other thing I'm kind of curious now, being that you work with families here, what do you see the different? You've worked international with I take it also with families, being that you're a librarian overseas. What kind of differences do you see in family patterns, things like that, with compared to, say, like you worked in China? What do you see the difference?
That's a great question. I feel like my time in China, like family relationships, our families know how to push our buttons because they install them, right? So that is a constant. And the expectations around what families do for each other is different culturally. Mm-hmm. Like how kids show up for parents in old age and how grown-ups show up for kids in the younger years are kind of different. Like I think about my experience in China with a lot of immigrants, people who had worked in the countryside, moving to the cities, and their children were at home with their grandparents. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of skipped a generation, like the grandparents were parenting the grandkids, so it's a little more complicated than, because it's not just the same way that we think about, cultural relationships between parents and children. But the emotional intelligence parts is constant.
Right.
If someone is treated in a, fierce or harsh way, right, that is what is regurgitated. So that is the constant among all the human family.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine you're seeing the similarities even among the different cultures.
We have a background of a dog lapping up water behind us here, so wondering if that's coming across, but
yeah, looking at, seeing the difference in different cultures and realizing that there's so much similarities.
Well, and my limited knowledge of families in overseas or in different countries is, that the kids don't really necessarily move away, that everybody kind of stays together as a family. Is that true, and is that changing?
I can't speak for, I can only speak for my experience, especially with Chinese families. And that is that my colleagues who were my same age still lived at home with their parents. And then when my colleague Cece got married, she moved in with her husband's family. Right. So there is a very different idea of independence and what it looks like. I think the American idea of independence and like, once you're 18, you're on your own and you got to go out there and do the hustle and live the adult life. That is like really challenging for young adults, right? Because we know we need to be interdependent, really got to rely on each other. And we've kind of, an American culture, have stripped that away. So I feel like for young adults, I'm saying this because I have two young adults, like that idea of having to be independent is so ingrained, and it's also false. But I can also see the challenges of living with your in-laws or living with your own parents for perpetuity. Like that has its own real challenges there.
Yeah, yeah. Typical American culture today, you're often don't even live in the proximity of extended family, and yet it adds so many extra challenges. But yeah, it's hard to imagine living with in-laws.
Oh, let's not go down that road. No, so it's who's listening. But in your past, there was a really interesting. You called yourself design thinking community strategist, and is that kind of tying into what we're talking about here? What? Tell me. I'm curious about that.
Oh, well, this is I'm trying to bring all of these threads together in my life. Design thinking is like a creative problem solving method that came out of the D school in Stanford. So I trained in that design thinking as a way of helping communities co-create solutions to problems. And so when I was a librarian, I also was on the design team to help to vision the future steps for the school and to help teams learn to vision and solve problems and redesign spaces and processes and systems to better suit students and families. And sorry, yes, families, but also like the community as a whole. So I think that's part of my librarian brain is a systems thinking, but it also brings in lots and lots and lots of empathy. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the merging of those two pieces of my career past.
So how has all these pieces, have you been able to put all the pieces together into your kindness machine, your coaching practice?
I think that the skills that come with design thinking, there's a lot of empathetic interviewing, okay. Active listening, holding space for possibility. A lot of times with parents, we get this fixed idea that, oh my gosh, my 15-year-old is still in bed at noon and even when he's 25, he's still going to be in bed at noon. And we kind of get these fixed mindsets around where our kids are. Right. But that kind of opening up to possibility, I have found has been really helpful in my coaching practice.
Yeah, I always like the saying, the mind is like cement, all mixed up and set in stone. And I think we get that pretty heavily as parents, because we get set in some ways of doing things that aren't the best ways, but it's what we're comfortable with, and it's hard to change.
Yeah, and I think that's why having this outside view, having a coach is helpful, because you can see it's not working, but you're like, I don't know what to do. And so having just somebody else who can help you open up to those possibilities is really helpful. Like I find it hard to coach myself. And hard to use design thinking to solve my own problems. But when I'm working with a team or a colleague or someone else who is trained in that, I'm like, oh yeah, I just use my skills now. But
it's hard to step back from it. I mean, we teach the parent communication classes, and every time we do it, it's like, oh, I need to start thinking about that for my own kids, because in our facilitating of helping other parents, it is hard to step back, right? And because we get so enmeshed, and I think the emotion of raising kids affects our ability to think critically and to step back. I love how you said leaving space for possibility.
Yeah. Just getting that, like you said, Gina, getting that gap, like zooming out. It's really a zooming out. Like I can be identified with this feeling. Oh, this feeling is like tension and stress, and it's hot and it's tight. And then if I take a step back, I can be like, oh, observing that instead of being so caught up in it, then I can like allow it to pass and make a choice instead of being like rageful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. It's
well, you talk about conscious parenting, which is gotten to be kind of how would you call it?
Well, it's a term that you hear a lot. In a way. You hear it a lot more now.
How do you define that to set it differently?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a buzzword, like you said, and people would also say like gentle parenting might be something that they also use, but like it's like conscious parenting is not, it is gentle, but it's also really difficult. And that makes it sound easy. And actually it's really hard. The way that I teach it is like being as present as you can be in the moment with yourself, with your own feelings, with your own noticing your own responses to your children, so that you can make choices that are long-term choices for your kids. Like we're playing a game of chess, not a game of checkers, right? Like I can hand you the iPad right now while we're at the restaurant, or I can give you some crayons and we can engage in conversation and learn how to sit at the table together, so that in the long term, you have communication skills. So it's about being present to help to really see your kids in the moment. That's the core of what it is I do.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, I always define, because I've been doing a mindset talk on my own, and I talk about consciousness, and I always, because to me it's very fluff and stuff when most people think about it kind of in a, I don't know, esoteric way or something, but I like to think about it as tuning in. Tuning into yourself first. Now, in conscious parenting, it means tuning into your parenting style. You're first tuning into yourself, but also tuning into your parenting style, tuning in to what your partner's doing. And because I always love, consciousness and mindfulness to me are pretty similar, and you go to a lot of these what might be considered the mindfulness gurus, and the first step they talk about usually is clear your mind. It's like, oh yeah, there's a good idea. That I can do that like that. No, most of the people I work with, their mind is so full of the negative thoughts, or and their mind is just churning a lot of times. So I talk about tuning in and listening to the messages, listening to the thoughts, to be aware of them, so that you can begin to change them. And I think that's the same thing as parenting. You have to be aware of your parenting. You be aware of where you are, what you're doing. You're being in the moment, but so you can change it. And knowing that, yeah, you make mistakes, but understanding that you can change that. And that a lot of times too, the other thing is the mistakes. Parents, they come to me and they go, I'm just screwing up my kid, because I've made so many mistakes, and the mistakes are really just lessons. If you tune into them and realize that, then you can make up for it. You can do something that'll help them learn. They learn off of these lessons.
Right. It's part of the journey, as I like to say.
Sorry that I went deep on that. I went off.
No, I loved it.
But it's consciousness to me. We need to turn it into a real solid thing instead of this kind of a, I don't know, out there kind of
nebulous. I totally agree with what you say, Don, about like the first step is noticing. Like that's a big step, because prior to that, our subconscious is running, like, oh, once we can bring it up and see what's happening, we notice it, then we have an opportunity to shift it. But, and that's actually what I would teach in libraries too, with kids. I'd be like, first we're going to observe, even if it's just an object, we will observe the object. What do we notice? And then start to get curious. And curiosity is such a huge part too of connecting with our kids and really uncovering what's going on beneath their behaviors that are troubling to us, and what's going on beneath our own behaviors that are troubling to us. So I would totally agree with that. Like the curiosity, the noticing, that helps you to become present and be conscious of your choices that you're making. Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, it's in questioning and doubting, and like you say, curiosity, where we begin to change. We don't change if everything's comfortable and everything's good. So yeah, it takes that ability to be able to really poke at yourself and question and wonder about things that make change.
Yeah. And I would offer too that we can't change when we're holding ourselves in judgment. Like mom guilt is such a real thing. Like we feel so guilty about every choice and mistake. And as long as we're holding that and being like, well, just messed up those kids so terribly, they'll never turn out, then it's really hard for us to shift into the next realm of possibility.
Right.
So I totally hear that too. Like it's
Luckily
a
we don't
process
have
of forgiveness.
we don't have dad guilt. Luckily, I don't have.
Oh yeah, I just focused on myself there, Dawn. Yeah, dad guilt.
It is an interesting point that, so much pressure is put on the mom with raising kids. Even though there are lots of dads who are very involved, yet it's kind of like they applaud dads when they're involved with their kids. Like, oh, isn't it wonderful that it's like, but nobody's applauding a mother,
Yeah, it's a really interesting paradox here especially, I'm just going to speak for my view of American culture, that moms are still the ones who are expected to show up and do a majority of the caregiving. And like you said, Gina, when dads do it, it's like, hey, you were amazing. It's challenging for me as a woman and a feminist to be like, oh, I don't know. I really don't agree with that. And I have like a wonderful, boyfriend who shows up so in the most beautiful ways for his kids. And still I'm like, I still have trouble with that one.
Well, I think it goes back. It's one of those mindsets. It's a pattern that has been established for so long that it's really hard to break. And I think we're slowly putting a few cracks in it, even with what we do, what you do, we're putting some cracks in that to know that either parent can equally be part of this and share in the duties, the lessons, all of that.
Yeah, we work with parents in group setting doing our classes, and it's always interesting. You might have some expectation of the mom and the dad, or their role as parents, but it really varies. All the different couples that we've worked with. Sometimes it's the mom who's more patient. Sometimes it's the dad of the kids, and it really can vary quite a bit. And even as far as their role and involvement with raising the kids. And
then to think about, there's kind of a mother-son bond and a father-daughter bond that play into that some too, I would think.
Yeah, there's can be a lot of different family dynamics that affect things.
Because I remember one of the couples we worked with, that the daughter really pushed all the mom's buttons. I mean, big time, and we were teaching her the communication that kind of helped to change it some, but it was a very strong, resistant kind of situation for them. So
yeah,
I'm curious if those two had a lot in common. The mother and the daughter.
Well, yeah, I know that with my oldest, I think we have my oldest son is a lot in common, and we get along really well, actually, but it always tended to he pushed my buttons big time, growing up. But.
Yeah, what I usually say, you're the tree and he's the apple, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Just especially, he's 24 now, especially as an adult, and just really seeing those similarities play out. But it's a matter of paying attention to it. The parents who come to our classes, they're examining, they're realizing what they're doing is not working, so they're willing to step back, and a lot of times they realize, okay, this is more about me than my kid's behavior. What am I bringing to it? And it's, having that awareness is huge, because in day-to-day life, and I know you work a lot with families with young kids, life is busy, and you taking that time to stop and step away. I love the whole idea of being curious about it, rather than, oh my God, my child's what are they doing? Is this stepping back and seeing that curiosity to examine it.
So is there a message you would like to get out in this, based on what your beliefs are with family and all? Is there some message that you like to be able to get out to our audience about what you do, what about families, parenting, any of that?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just continue on what Gina is saying and like being more curious than certain about our kids and ourselves allows us to have some space to shift. And so instead of passing a judgment and being like, oh, he's never going to get it, asking, what is he doing right now? Why is he doing that? Why am I reacting this way? Just instead of saying the statement, asking the question. And the other thing I would say is it's never too late. Like we still have time. There's still time.
Yep. No matter what our ages of our children
Yeah,
are, it's a relationship, and just any relationship can be healed and changed, and there's always room for growth.
Yeah, I always tell the story about one of my oldest clients when I was working at my tapping practice, my EFT practice. She was 72, if I remember right, and just gotten divorced, all this, and expected to move up to Charlotte back from Florida, where her kids lived here in Charlotte, and just expected when she got here, the reason she moved here is because she thought it was going to be this grand reunion with her kids, and they were going to be right there wanting to do stuff with her, go places. Well, the problem was that when they were growing up, she was military mom, not in the military, but just, oh my gosh, stern and strict and not the nicest mom in the world. And so her kids drifted away from her and didn't want to have anything to do with her. And she would tell them off before she would tell them she loved them. And so we had to do a lot of work with changing her. And we were able to kind of build back that relationship and get her back kind of talking to the kids, doing things with them. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't completely healed, but it was in a much better place where she could do stuff with them and talk nicely to them. So anyway, it's never too late to get that relationship back and hone it in and make it a good relationship.
So tell us how people can learn more about you, Adrienne, and the things you do.
Oh yeah, come to my website. It's www.thekindnessmachine.com. Then you can sign up for my newsletter there, and I share events and other offerings there. That's the best place to find me. I'm also on Instagram at the.kindness.machine. But my website is the best spot to find me. And just message me and let's chat. Let's chat about conscious parenting and healing our wounds and moving forward and bigger and brighter possibilities for our families.
Right.
Well, and I noticed on your site that you do free conscious parenting conversations or talks that anybody can join in on. So that's something to check out your website for that. And Adrienne, we really appreciate this. Was an interesting talk. I love the direction it went. It covered a lot of really good information. So really, thank you so much for being part of this.
Yes. It's always wonderful to talk with other people of like minds and just expand on the ideas. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. You two are magical. I love working with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
So that's our podcast for today. We hope you really enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed talking with Adrienne as much as we did. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to leave us a comment. If you like what you heard today, you, of course, find out more about Adrienne by going to her site, The Kindness Machine, thekindnessmachine.com. I have to get that right. You can also learn more about us and our coaching program and find out more about our next workshop by going to focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can follow us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family.
And on Instagram, Gina at Focused Healthy Family.
And remember, how you speak to your children now shapes their future.